Welcome to a story where survival means choosing between silence and ruin. Settle in as we ride into the dust and danger of 1875 Nebraska. In Sagebrush Flats, Nebraska, in the late winter of 1875, Fanny Garrison stood in the doorway of her saloon and watched a man she did not know ride into town. The drought had been going on for 8 months. Wells were drying up, neighbors were fighting over water rights, and Fanny carried a letter in her bodice that could destroy the most powerful man in 3 counties. The rider dismounted. He was tall, lean, with the careful movements of someone who had seen too much violence. His gray coat was dusty. His dark brown hair was cut short. His beard was trimmed close. He tied his horse to the rail and looked up at her. His eyes were dark blue, steady, and tired.
"Ma'am, I am looking for work. Heard there might be something in town."
Fanny did not move from the doorway.
Who told you that?
Man in Kearney. Said Sagebrush Flats was hiring ranch hands. Said the drought was making people desperate.
He was right about the desperate part. What is your name?
Joseph Daniels,
Where are you from, Joseph Daniels?
Virginia. Before that, the war. After that, nowhere in particular.
She knew the type. Men who had fought for the wrong side and were still trying to find a place where no one cared. She stepped aside.
Come in. I will give you a drink. Then we will talk about work.
Joseph followed her into the dim interior. The saloon was clean, but sparse. A bar ran along one wall. A few tables sat empty. The floor was swept. Fanny moved behind the bar and poured him water from a pitcher. He drank it slowly.
Thank you.
You are welcome. There is no ranch work right now. The drought killed most of the cattle. But I need someone to help me with something else.
What kind of something else?
The kind that might get you killed.
Joseph set the glass down.
I have been close to killed before. What are we talking about?
There is a man in this town named Eustace Ramsey. He works at the land office. He sells claims to homesteaders, but the deeds are forged. He has been doing it for 2 years. He takes their money, gives them papers, and when the real owners show up, the homesteaders lose everything.
Why has no one stopped him?
Because he is careful. He never raises his voice. He smiles. He shakes hands. And by the time people figure out what he has done, it is too late. He also has friends. The railroad agent. The banker. The sheriff.
And you?
I have a ledger.
Joseph leaned forward slightly.
What kind of ledger?
The kind that names every bribe in this town, every forged deed, every stolen claim. I found it 3 weeks ago. A drunk cowboy left it on a table. He worked for Ramsey. I hid it before anyone noticed it was gone.
And now, Ramsey knows you have it.
He knows someone has it. He does not know it is me. But he is looking. And when he finds out, he will kill me.
So why not go to the law?
Because the law is on his payroll.
Joseph was quiet for a moment.
What do you need me to do?
I need you to help me get that ledger to someone who can use it. There is a federal marshal in Omaha. If we can get the ledger to him, Ramsey goes to prison. The town gets cleaned up. People get their land back.
And if we do not?
Then, Ramsey keeps stealing. The railroad condemns homesteads. People lose everything. And I end up dead in a ditch.
Joseph studied her face. She was beautiful in a hard, determined way. Her green eyes did not blink. Her jaw was set. She was not asking for a favor. She was offering a deal.
Why me?
Because you are not from here. You do not owe anyone anything. And you look like a man who does not run.
He nodded slowly.
I will help you. But not as a bargain. Not as a deal. If I do this, it is because it is the right thing to do.
Fanny blinked. She had expected negotiation. She had expected demands. She had not expected this.
You do not want money?
I want to do the right thing. That is enough.
Something shifted in her expression. The hard edge softened just a fraction.
All right. Then, we start tomorrow. For now, you can sleep in the back room. There is a cot. I will bring you food.
Thank you.
She turned away, then paused.
Joseph.
Yes? She and the warned Rundant Reckthing, one Souter said, they were place at the time. The warned the wind stas but that we year in Lutch coins. Or yes, with a lost lots mark Pogan. Yes, the waist bone frest in the teaching nine ties. The head had barred fire. They called it fire. The wind finally was pay for a Christ its walking.
Why did you really come here?
Because I am tired of running. And I thought maybe this was a place where I could stop.
She did not answer. She just walked into the back and left him standing there. That night, Fanny lay in her own room upstairs and stared at the ceiling. The letter in her bodice rustled when she breathed. It was from a man named Thomas Garrett, a wealthy rancher who had offered her marriage once. She had refused. He had written her a letter threatening to ruin her reputation if she ever spoke about what he had done to a young woman who worked in his house. Fanny had kept the letter as insurance. But now, with the ledger and Ramsay hunting for it, she had two secrets that could destroy powerful men, and she had no idea which one would kill her first. In the back room, Joseph lay on the cot and thought about Virginia. He had been a Confederate officer. He had fought. He had lost. He had spent 10 years drifting west, trying to forget. But he could not forget. And he could not forgive himself. Maybe helping Fanny was a way to start. The next morning, Fanny woke him before dawn.
Ramsay is coming. Someone told him I was asking questions. We need to move the ledger now.
Joseph sat up, pulled on his boots.
Where is it?
Hidden in the false bottom of a trunk in my room. But if he searches the saloon, he will find it.
Then, we take it out before he gets here.
They moved fast. Fanny led him upstairs. Her room was small and neat. She knelt by a trunk at the foot of her bed, pulled out clothes, and pressed a hidden latch. The false bottom lifted. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, worn and stained. She handed it to Joseph. He flipped it open. Page after page of names, dates, amounts. Deeds marked forged. Claims marked stolen. It was damning.
If he finds this, we are both dead.
Then let us make sure he does not find it.
They heard boots on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. Fanny grabbed her revolver from the bedside table. Joseph tucked the ledger inside his coat. The door swung open. Eustace Ramsay stood in the doorway. He was a thin man with pale eyes and a pleasant smile. He wore a dark suit and a bowler hat. He did not look dangerous. But Fanny knew better. Ramsey said good morning in a voice as smooth as butter. He said he had heard she was looking for information about land claims. He said he wanted to help. His smile never wavered. Joseph stepped between Fanny and Ramsey.
She is not interested.
Ramsey looked at Joseph with mild curiosity. Ramsey asked who Joseph was. He said he had not seen him before. He said he liked to know everyone who came through town. Joseph said he was just passing through. Ramsey said that was a shame. He said Sagebrush Flats needed good men. He said maybe Joseph should stay. He said maybe he and Fanny could come to an arrangement. He said he had a proposition. He said if Fanny agreed to marry Joseph, Ramsey would make sure no one bothered her about the missing ledger. He said it was a fair deal. He said everyone would be happy. Joseph felt the weight of the ledger against his ribs. He looked at Fanny. Her face was pale, her jaw tight. Ramsey was offering her a way out. But it was a cage, a marriage as a transaction, a life built on silence.
No.
Ramsey blinked. Ramsey asked what Joseph meant. Joseph said he would not marry Fanny as part of a deal. He said if he married her, it would be because he loved her. He said he would not treat her like property. Ramsey's smile thinned. Ramsey said Joseph was making a mistake. He said he was trying to be generous. He said Fanny had something that did not belong to her. He said if she did not return it, things would get unpleasant. Fanny stepped forward.
I do not have what you are looking for.
Ramsey looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Ramsey said he believed her. He said he hoped she was telling the truth. He said it would be a shame if something happened to her saloon. He said fires were common in drought season. He said he hoped she was careful. He tipped his hat and walked out. The silence after he left was heavy. Fanny sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were shaking.
He knows.
Maybe. But he does not have proof. We need to move fast.
The marshal in Omaha is 3 days away. Ramsey will not wait 3 days.
Then, we do not go to Omaha. We find someone closer.
There is no one closer.
There has to be. Someone Ramsey has not bought.
Fanny thought for a moment.
There is a judge in Kearney, Judge Harlan. He is old. He does not like Ramsey. But I do not know if he will stand up to him.
It is better than nothing.
Kearney is a day away by horse. We would have to leave now.
Then, we leave now.
They packed quickly. Fanny changed into a riding skirt and a heavy coat. Joseph saddled 2 horses from the stable behind the saloon. They rode out of town just as the sun cleared the horizon. The prairie stretched flat and empty around them. The drought had turned the grass brown. The wells along the road were dry. They rode hard, stopping only to water the horses from a shared well near a burned-out homestead. By midday, they were miles from Sagebrush Flats. Fanny looked back once. Dust rose in the distance. Someone was following them.
Joseph. We have company.
He turned. 3 riders, closing fast.
How far to the next town?
10 miles. Maybe more.
We will not make it.
Then, we fight.
Joseph looked at her. She was already pulling her revolver from her belt.
You know how to use that?
I own a saloon in a cattle town. What do you think?
He almost smiled. They pushed the horses harder. The riders behind them were gaining. Joseph scanned the landscape. There, a shallow ravine cutting through the prairie. Not much cover, but better than nothing.
There. We make a stand.
They veered toward the ravine. The horses slid down the slope. Joseph and Fanny dismounted, grabbed their rifles from the saddles, and crouched behind a low outcrop of rock. The riders reached the edge of the ravine and stopped. One of them called down. The man said Ramsey wanted the ledger. He said if they handed it over, they could go free. He said no one had to get hurt. Joseph did not answer. He aimed his rifle. The man sighed. The man said they were making a mistake. Then he and the other two riders opened fire. Bullets whined off the rocks. Joseph fired back, steady and calm. One of the riders fell. The other two retreated, circling to find a better angle. Fanny fired twice. One of the horses went down. The riders scrambled behind it for cover.
We cannot hold them forever.
We do not have to. Just long enough.
Long enough for what?
Long enough for them to run out of patience.
The riders fired again. Joseph and Fanny stayed low. Minutes passed. Then one of the riders shouted that they were wasting time. He said Ramsey would not pay them if they came back empty-handed. The other rider argued. Then they both mounted up and rode off, leaving their fallen companion behind. Fanny let out a breath.
They will go back and tell Ramsey where we are.
Then, we keep moving.
They climbed out of the ravine and rode on. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of Kearney. The town was larger than Sagebrush Flats, with brick buildings and a proper courthouse. They found Judge Harlan in his office, an old man with white hair and sharp eyes. Joseph handed him the ledger. The judge read for a long time. When he looked up, his expression was grim. The judge said this was enough to hang Ramsey. He said it was also enough to implicate half the county. He said if he acted on this, there would be blood. He asked if they were prepared for that. Joseph said they were. The judge said he would issue warrants. He said he would send word to the federal marshal. He said it would take time. He asked where they would go in the meantime. Fanny said they would go back to Sagebrush Flats. The judge said that was dangerous. Fanny said she had a business to protect. The judge nodded. He said he admired her courage. He said he hoped she lived long enough to see Ramsey hang. They rode back that night. The prairie was dark and cold. Joseph rode close to Fanny.
You did not have to go back.
Yes, I did. That saloon is all I have.
It is not all you have.
She looked at him.
What do you mean?
You have me. If you want me.
Fanny pulled her horse to a stop. Joseph stopped beside her.
You do not know me. You do not know what I have done.
I know enough. I know you are brave. I know you are honest. I know you did not let Ramsey buy you.
There is more. There is a letter. A man named Thomas Garrett. He wanted to marry me. I refused. He wrote me a letter threatening to ruin me if I ever spoke about what he did to a girl in his house. I kept it. I have been carrying it for 2 years.
Why are you telling me this?
Because if you are going to stay, you need to know. I am not just fighting Ramsey. I am fighting Garrett too, and if the truth comes out, it will destroy me.
Then we will make sure the truth comes out the right way. We will make sure Garrett pays for what he did. And we will make sure you are safe.
Fanny felt something crack open inside her chest. She had been alone for so long. She had been fighting for so long. And now, here was this man, this stranger, offering to stand beside her without asking for anything in return.
Why?
Because it is the right thing to do. And because I think I am falling in love with you.
She did not answer. She just leaned over and kissed him. It was brief and fierce and desperate. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet.
I think I am falling in love with you too.
They rode into Sagebrush Flats just before dawn. The town was quiet. Too quiet. Joseph felt the hair on the back of his neck rise.
Something is wrong.
They dismounted and walked toward the saloon. The door was open. Inside, the tables were overturned. The bar was smashed. Bottles lay broken on the floor. And on the wall, written in lamp oil, were the words, "Return the ledger or burn." Fanny stood in the doorway, staring. Her hands clenched into fists.
He did this. Ramsey did this.
We will rebuild.
He will burn it down again.
Not if we stop him first.
Fanny turned to him.
The judge said it would take time. We do not have time.
Then we force his hand. We make him come to us.
How?
We tell him we have the ledger. We tell him we are willing to make a deal. We set a meeting. And when he shows up, we have witnesses. We have the law.
The law is bought.
Not all of it. The judge will send men. We just need to hold out until they arrive.
Fanny thought for a moment. Then she nodded.
All right. We do it your way.
They spent the morning cleaning up the saloon. By noon, word had spread through town that Fanny Garrison was back, and she was looking for Eustace Ramsey. By evening, Ramsey walked through the saloon door. He looked at the broken furniture, the shattered bottles. He smiled. Ramsey said it was a shame what had happened. He said vandals were a problem in these parts. He said he hoped Fanny had insurance. Fanny stepped forward.
I have the ledger. I am willing to make a deal.
Ramsey's smile widened. Ramsey said he was glad she was being reasonable. He asked what she wanted. Fanny said she wanted money. She said she wanted $5,000. She said in exchange, she would give him the ledger and disappear. Ramsey said that was a lot of money. Fanny said the ledger was worth more than that. Ramsey said he would think about it. Fanny said he had until tomorrow night. Ramsey nodded. He said he would be in touch. He walked out. Joseph watched him go.
He will not bring money.
I know. He will bring men. He will try to kill us and take the ledger.
And we will be ready.
That night, they prepared. Joseph barricaded the windows. Fanny loaded every gun in the saloon. They sent a message to Judge Harlan, telling him when and where Ramsey would strike. Then they waited. The next day crawled by. Townspeople avoided the saloon. The streets were empty. By evening, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty road. Fanny stood behind the bar, revolver in hand. Joseph stood by the door, rifle ready. At 8 o'clock, Ramsey arrived. He was not alone. 6 men walked with him, all armed. They stopped outside the saloon. Ramsey called out. Ramsey said he had the money. He said Fanny should come out and make the exchange. He said there was no need for trouble. Joseph stepped into the doorway.
send one man in with the money. Fanny will send one man out with the ledger. Everyone else stays outside.
Ramsey smiled. Ramsey said that was not how this worked. He said Fanny would bring the ledger out, or he would burn the saloon down with her inside. Joseph did not move.
You are welcome to try.
Ramsey's smile faded. He gestured to his men. They spread out, surrounding the saloon. One of them threw a torch onto the roof. Flames caught in the dry wood. Fanny ran upstairs with a bucket of water. Joseph fired once. The man with the torch went down. The other men opened fire. Bullets tore through the walls. Joseph ducked behind the doorframe, returned fire. 2 more men fell. Ramsey pulled his own gun, aimed at Joseph. Before he could fire, a voice shouted from down the street it was Judge Harlan. He rode into town with 4 federal deputies. They dismounted, weapons drawn. The judge ordered Ramsey to drop his gun. Ramsey hesitated. Then he turned and ran. Joseph sprinted after him. Ramsey cut through an alley heading for the edge of town. Joseph tackled him in the dust. They fought, rolling, punching. Ramsey pulled a knife. Joseph grabbed his wrist, twisted. The knife fell. Joseph pinned him down.
It is over.
Ramsey spat dust. His calm mask was gone. He was just a desperate, cornered man. The deputies pulled him to his feet, cuffed him. Judge Harlan walked over. The judge said Ramsey would hang. He said the ledger was more than enough evidence. He said the town would be cleaned up. He said Fanny and Joseph were heroes. Fanny appeared, soot-streaked and exhausted. The fire on the saloon roof was out. The building was damaged but standing. She looked at Joseph.
Is it really over?
It is really over.
She sagged against him. He wrapped his arms around her. For the first time in months, she let herself breathe. The next morning, Judge Harlan arrested the railroad agent and the banker. The sheriff resigned. Ramsey was taken to Kearney to await trial. The town began to rebuild. Fanny stood in her saloon, looking at the broken tables and the scorched ceiling. Joseph stood beside her.
We can fix this.
I know. But it will take time.
We have time.
She turned to him.
What about Garrett? The letter?
We take it to the judge. We make sure he pays too.
And if it ruins me?
It will not. Because you did nothing wrong. And I will stand beside you no matter what anyone says.
Fanny felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so long carrying secrets, so long fighting alone. And now, she did not have to.
I want to marry you. Not as a deal. Not as a bargain. Because I love you.
I want to marry you too. For the same reason.
They kissed there in the ruined saloon, surrounded by broken glass and scorched wood. It was not perfect. It was not easy. But it was real. 2 weeks later, they rowed out to the river at the edge of town. The drought had broken. Rain had come. The river was running again. They stood on the bank, the town behind them, and spoke the truth out loud at last. Fanny told him about the girl Garrett had hurt, about the guilt she carried for not speaking sooner. Joseph told her about the war, about the things he had done, about the forgiveness he was still learning to accept. They did not hide. They did not pretend. They just stood there, holding hands, and let the truth exist between them. And when they were done, they turned back toward the town. Together. The sun was setting. The prairie was green again. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt possible. 3 months later, Ramsey was hanged in Kearney. Thomas Garrett was arrested on charges of assault and intimidation. The girl he had hurt came forward, and others followed. Fanny testified. It was hard. It was public. But Joseph stood beside her in the courtroom. And when it was over, she walked out with her head high. The saloon was rebuilt. Fanny kept running it, but Joseph worked beside her. They married in the spring in a small ceremony by the river. The town came. The judge officiated. And when it was done, Fanny and Joseph rode back to the saloon, hand in hand, ready to build a life together. It was not the life either of them had expected, but it was the life they chose. And that made all the difference. Fanny never forgot the girl Garrett had hurt. She started a fund to help women in trouble, women who had nowhere else to turn. Joseph helped her run it. They used the money from the ledger recovery, money that had been stolen from homesteaders, and returned. It was a way to turn something broken into something good. One evening, a year after their wedding, Fanny stood on the porch of the saloon and watched the sun set over the prairie. Joseph came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist.
What are you thinking about?
I am thinking about how far we have come.
And how far we still have to go.
Yes, but I am not afraid anymore.
Neither am I.
She leaned back against him, felt his warmth, his steadiness. The drought was over. The town was healing. And she was loved, truly loved. Not as a transaction, not as a deal, just as herself. And that was everything. The prairie wind blew through the dry grass, carrying the scent of rain and dust and new beginnings. Fanny closed her eyes and smiled. 2 years passed. The town of Sagebrush Flats grew. New families moved in, drawn by the promise of clean land titles and honest government. The wells were dug deeper. The cattle herds rebuilt. Fanny's saloon became a gathering place, not just for drinkers, but for town meetings, for celebrations, for planning the future. Joseph worked with the new homesteaders, teaching them how to manage water rights, how to share resources during dry spells. He was respected. He was trusted. And he had finally stopped running. One morning, Fanny woke up feeling sick. She did not tell Joseph at first. But when it happened again the next day, and the day after that, she knew. She was carrying their child. She told him that evening, after the saloon closed. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked her up and spun her around, laughing. She laughed too, dizzy and happy and terrified all at once.
We are going to be parents.
Yes, we are.
Are you scared?
Yes. Are you?
Terrified. But I would not change it for anything.
Their daughter was born in the spring. They named her Grace, after Joseph's mother. She had Fanny's green eyes and Joseph's dark hair. She was loud and stubborn and perfect. Fanny held her in the rocking chair by the window and watched Joseph pace the room, trying to soothe her when she cried. He was awkward at first, unsure. But he learned. And Fanny watched him become the father she knew he would be. Steady, patient, loving. Grace grew. She learned to walk in the saloon, toddling between tables. She learned to talk, mimicking the customers with her high, clear voice. And she learned to be brave, watching her parents face every challenge with honesty and courage. When Grace was 5, a new threat came to Sagebrush Flats. A land speculator from Omaha, backed by Eastern money, tried to buy up homesteads and consolidate them into a single massive ranch. He offered good money, but the terms were harsh. If the homesteaders failed to pay off their loans within 3 years, they lost everything. Some families took the deal. They were desperate. The drought had come back, milder this time, but still dangerous. Others refused. They did not trust the speculator. They remembered what Ramsey had done. Fanny and Joseph stood with the families who refused. They organized meetings. They shared resources. They dug community wells. And when the speculators sent men to intimidate the holdouts, Joseph and a group of armed homesteaders met them at the edge of town. The men turned back without firing a shot. The speculator gave up. He sold his interests and left. The homesteaders kept their land. And Sagebrush Flats remained a town built on trust, not greed. Years passed. Grace grew into a young woman, smart and fierce like her mother, steady and kind like her father. She wanted to be a teacher. Fanny and Joseph saved money to send her to school in Omaha. It was hard to let her go, but they knew she needed to follow her own path. The night before she left, Fanny sat with her on the porch.
You are going to do great things.
Grace smiled. Grace said she learned from the best. She said she wanted to come back one day and teach in Sagebrush Flats. She said she wanted to help build the town the way her parents had. Fanny felt tears prick her eyes.
I am so proud of you.
Grace hugged her. Then she went inside to pack. Joseph came out and sat beside Fanny.
She will be fine.
I know. But I will miss her.
So will I.
They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars come out over the prairie. Then, Joseph took her hand.
We did it. We built something good.
We did. And it is not over yet.
No, it is not.
Fanny leaned against him, felt his warmth, his steadiness. The same steadiness she had felt that first day, when a stranger rode into town and offered to help without asking for anything in return. She thought about the ledger, about the fight, about the fire. She thought about the fear and the courage and the love that had carried them through. And she thought about the future. Their future. Together. 10 years after Grace left for school, she returned. She brought with her a husband, a good man who worked as a surveyor. They built a house on the edge of town and started a school. Fanny and Joseph watched their grandchildren grow up in the same streets where they had fought for justice. The saloon was still standing. Fanny still ran it, though she had help now. Joseph spent his days working with the homesteaders, mediating disputes, teaching the next generation how to survive on the prairie. One evening, Fanny stood in the saloon and looked around. The walls were covered with photographs, memories of the town's history. There was a picture of the courthouse in Kearney, where Ramsey had been tried. There was a picture of the river, where she and Joseph had spoken the truth. There was a picture of Grace on her wedding day. And there was a picture of Fanny and Joseph, taken on their own wedding day, young and fierce and hopeful. She traced her finger over the image. Joseph came up behind her.
What are you thinking about?
I am thinking about how lucky I am.
We both are.
Yes. We are.
He kissed the top of her head.
Come on. Let us go home.
They walked out of the saloon together, hand in hand. The prairie wind blew through the streets, carrying the scent of dust and rain and new grass. The town was quiet. The stars were out. And Fanny felt a deep, abiding peace. She had fought for this. She had risked everything for this. And it had been worth it. Every moment, every choice, every scar. Because she had not just survived. She had built a life. A real life. With a man who loved her, not for what she could give him, but for who she was. And that was everything. They walked to the river, the same spot where they had stood all those years ago and spoken the truth. The water was high, fed by spring rains. The moon was bright. Fanny turned to Joseph.
Do you remember the first time we came here?
I remember. You told me about Garrett, about the letter, about everything you were afraid of.
And you said we would face it together.
We did. And we won.
Yes. We did.
She kissed him, soft and slow. The kiss of two people who had seen the worst and chosen to build the best. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his.
I love you, Joseph Daniels.
I love you too, Fanny Daniels.
They stood there on the riverbank, the town behind them, the prairie stretching out before them. And for the first time, in a long time, Fanny did not think about the past. She did not think about the fight, or the fear, or the secrets. She just thought about the man beside her, the life they had built, and the future they would face together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The drought came again, as it always did on the prairie. But this time, the town was ready. They had deeper wells. They had community reserves. They had learned to share. And they had leaders who cared more about people than profit. Fanny and Joseph watched the new generation take over the work they had started. Grace ran the school. Her husband mapped new water sources. The homesteaders cooperated instead of competing. And the town thrived. One afternoon, Fanny sat on the porch of the saloon and watched the children play in the street. Joseph sat beside her, his hair gray now, his hands rough from years of work. But his eyes were still the same. Steady. Kind. Honest.
Do you ever regret it?
Regret? What?
Staying. Fighting. All of it.
No. Not for a second.
Good. Neither do I.
They sat in comfortable silence. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty street. The prairie wind blew through the dry grass, carrying the scent of rain and dust and home. Fanny reached over and took Joseph's hand. He squeezed gently.
We did good, Joseph.
Yes, we did.
And as the sun set over sagebrush flats, Fanny felt a deep, abiding gratitude for the man beside her, for the life they had built, for the town they had saved, and for the truth they had spoken out loud at the riverbank all those years ago. The truth that had set them both free. The years continued to pass. Fanny and Joseph grew old together. They watched their grandchildren grow up and have children of their own. They watched the town change and grow. The railroad came through, but on fair terms. The cattle industry rebuilt. New businesses opened. And through it all, the saloon remained. A landmark. A gathering place. A reminder of what courage and honesty could build. One winter evening, when Fanny was in her 60s, she stood in the saloon and looked at the old photograph on the wall. The one of her and Joseph on their wedding day. She traced her finger over the glass, remembering that day. The hope, the fear, the love. Joseph came up behind her, moving slowly now, his joints stiff from years of hard work.
What are you looking at?
Us. When we were young.
We are still young.
You are a terrible liar.
He laughed. She turned and kissed him. It was soft and familiar and full of decades of love.
I would do it all again. Every moment.
So would I.
They stood there in the quiet saloon, surrounded by memories. And Fanny thought about the letter she had carried for so long, the fear that had driven her, the courage that had saved her, and the love that had healed her. She thought about Ramsey, rotting in a grave in Kearney. She thought about Garrett, who had died in prison years ago. She thought about the ledger, which now sat in a museum in Omaha, a piece of history. And she thought about the river, the place where she and Joseph had spoken the truth, the place where everything had changed. She took Joseph's hand.
Let us go to the river.
Now?
Now.
They walked slowly through the dark streets, past the houses and the shops and the school. The town was quiet. The stars were bright. The air was cold and clear. When they reached the river, Fanny stopped and looked at the water. It was running strong, fed by winter snow. The moon was full, casting silver light across the prairie.
Do you remember what you said to me here? The first time?
I said we would face everything together, and that I was falling in love with you.
And I said I was falling in love with you too.
We were right.
Yes. We were.
She turned to him, took both his hands in hers.
Thank you, Joseph. For everything. For standing beside me. For loving me. For building this life with me.
Thank you for letting me. For trusting me. For loving me back.
They kissed there on the riverbank, the same place where they had kissed so many times before. And when they pulled apart, Fanny looked at the town behind them. The lights in the windows, the smoke from the chimneys, the life they had built. It was not perfect, it was not easy, but it was real, and it was theirs. Joseph wrapped his arm around her shoulders. She leaned against him, feeling his warmth, his steadiness. The same steadiness she had felt that first day, when a stranger rode into town and changed everything.
Are you happy?
Yes. I am happy.
Good. So am I.
They stood there for a long time, watching the river flow, watching the stars wheel overhead. And when they finally turned back toward the town, they walked hand in hand, just as they always had. Together. Always together. The final years were gentle. Fanny and Joseph spent their days on the porch of the saloon, watching the town move around them. Grace visited often, bringing the grandchildren. The great-grandchildren played in the street, laughing and shouting, and Fanny watched them with a full heart. One spring morning, Joseph did not wake up. He died in his sleep, peacefully, with Fanny beside him. She held his hand and cried. She cried for the years they had had, and the years they would not. She cried for the man who had ridden into town a stranger and left as her everything. The town mourned with her. They buried Joseph by the river, the place he had loved, the place where he and Fanny had spoken the truth. And Fanny stood at his grave and said goodbye. But it was not a sad goodbye. It was a grateful one. Because she had been loved. Truly loved. And that was everything. She lived for 5 more years after Joseph died. She kept running the saloon, kept helping the homesteaders, kept watching the town grow, and every evening she walked to the river and sat by Joseph's grave. She told him about her day. She told him about the grandchildren. She told him about the town, and she thanked him for everything, for standing beside her, for loving her, for building a life with her. When Fanny died, they buried her next to Joseph, and the town of Sagebrush Flats remembered them, not as heroes, not as legends, but as 2 people who had chosen to fight for what was right, who had chosen to love each other honestly, who had chosen to build something good. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The story of Fanny and Joseph became part of Sagebrush Flats. Parents told their children about the woman who had stood up to corruption, and the man who had chosen honor over profit. Teachers taught about the ledger that had exposed the truth, and the trial that had changed the town. And every year, on the anniversary of Ramsey's arrest, the town gathered by the river to remember. Grace lived to be an old woman herself. She taught in the school until she could no longer stand at the front of the classroom. And when she told stories about her mother and stepfather, she always ended the same way. She would say that love was not just a feeling. It was a choice. A choice to stand beside someone when it was hard. A choice to trust when it was frightening. A choice to build something together, even when the world tried to tear it apart. Her students would listen, wide-eyed, and ask if it was all true. And Grace would smile and say yes. Every word. The saloon stood for another 50 years after Fanny died. It became a museum, filled with artifacts from the town's early days. The ledger was displayed in a glass case, its pages yellow and brittle. Visitors would come from all over Nebraska to see it, to read the names, to understand what courage looked like. And in the corner of the museum, there was a photograph, the one of Fanny and Joseph on their wedding day, young and fierce and hopeful. Below it, a small plaque read, Fanny Garrison Daniels and Joseph Daniels. They chose truth. They chose love. They chose each other. The river still flows past Sagebrush Flats. The prairie wind still blows through the dry grass. The stars still shine bright over the endless horizon. And if you stand by the 2 graves on the gentle rise, you can almost feel them. The courage, the love, the choice to fight for something good. That is the legacy they left. Not wealth, not power, not fame, but the simple, enduring truth that one person, standing up, can change everything. And 2 people, standing together, can change the world. The town continued to grow long after Fanny and Joseph were gone. The railroad brought new settlers, new businesses, new opportunities. But the people of Sagebrush Flats never forgot where they came from. They never forgot the drought years, the fights over water, the corruption that nearly destroyed them, and they never forgot the two people who had refused to let it happen. The Saloon-turned-museum became a landmark. Tourists stopped there on their way across the prairie. They read the plaques. They looked at the photographs. They studied the ledger behind its glass case. And they asked the same questions. How did one woman stand up to so much power? How did one man choose honor when it would have been easier to walk away? The answer was always the same. They loved each other, and that love gave them the courage to do what was right. Years turned into decades. Decades turned into a century. The town changed. Cars replaced horses. Electric lights replaced oil lamps. Paved roads replaced dirt tracks. But the river still flowed. The prairie still stretched to the horizon. And the two graves on the gentle rise were still tended, still visited, still remembered. Historians came to study the ledger. They wrote papers about corruption in the territorial land offices. They analyzed the trial transcripts. They mapped the smuggling routes Ramsey had used. And they always came back to the same conclusion. Without Fanny Garrison's courage to hold on to that letter, without Joseph Daniels' refusal to compromise, the entire system might have continued unchecked for years. One afternoon, a great-great-granddaughter of Fanny and Joseph stood by the graves. She was young, maybe 20, with dark auburn hair like her ancestor. She had come from Denver to see the place her family talked about, to understand the story she had heard all her life. She knelt by the graves and traced her fingers over the names carved into the weathered wood. Fanny Garrison Daniels, Joseph Daniels. She thought about what it must have been like to stand alone against corruption, to risk everything for the truth, to build a life out of dust and determination and love. And she made a promise. She would carry that legacy forward. She would remember that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. She would remember that love was not just a feeling, but a commitment, a partnership, a choice to stand together, no matter what. She stood and looked out over the prairie. The wind blew through the grass, carrying the scent of rain and dust and endless sky. And she felt a deep connection to this place, to these people, to this story. Because it was her story too. The story of everyone who had ever chosen to fight for what was right, who had ever loved someone enough to stand beside them through everything, who had ever believed that one person, one choice, one act of courage could change the world. She walked back to the museum and spent hours reading the letters, the journals, the newspaper clippings. She read Fanny's handwriting, steady and strong. She read Joseph's notes, careful and precise. She read the trial testimony, the witness statements, the verdict. And she understood. This was not just history. This was a roadmap, a guide for how to live with integrity, with courage, with love. When she left Sagebrush Flats that evening, she carried something with her. Not the ledger, not the letters, not any physical artifact, but something more important. The knowledge that she came from people who had refused to give up, who had chosen to build instead of destroy, who had loved fiercely and fought bravely and left the world better than they found it. And that was everything. The museum closed at sunset. The curator locked the doors and walked home through the quiet streets. Inside, the exhibit sat in darkness. the ledger in its case, the photographs on the walls, the wedding picture of Fanny and Joseph, forever young, forever hopeful. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the stars. The river flowed past the town, just as it had for centuries, and on the gentle rise, two graves stood side by side. Silent, peaceful, eternal. The wind whispered through the grass. The stars wheeled overhead. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the prairie night, the spirit of Sagebrush Flats lived on. In the stories passed down through generations, in the lessons taught to children, in the choices made by people who remembered what courage looked like. Fanny and Joseph were gone. But their legacy remained, not carved in stone or written in books, but alive in the hearts of everyone who believed that truth mattered, that love endured, that standing together, two people could face anything. And that was the greatest monument of all. Not a building, or a statue, or a plaque, but the living, breathing continuation of their choice. To fight for what was right, to love without compromise, to build a life that mattered. The night deepened, the stars brightened, the river flowed on. And in the quiet darkness, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear them. Fanny's fierce determination, Joseph's steady strength, the sound of two people who had chosen each other, chosen truth, chosen courage, and changed everything. The story became legend. Not the dramatic kind with exaggerated heroes and impossible feats, but the real kind. The kind that settled into the bones of a place and became part of its identity. Sagebrush Flats was known across Nebraska as the town that had refused to be bought, the town that had stood up to corruption and won. And at the heart of that story were two names, Fanny and Joseph. Schools in 3 counties taught about the ledger. History professors used it as a case study in frontier justice. Legal scholars cited the trial as precedent for holding territorial officials accountable. But for the people of Sagebrush Flats, it was simpler than that. It was a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they chose to stand together. The museum expanded over the years. New exhibits were added. Maps showing the drought of 1875 and the wells that families had fought over. Photographs of homesteaders who had survived those brutal winter months. Documents detailing the railroad's expansion and the land office's role in it. And always, at the center, the ledger. Behind glass, protected, preserved. Every bribe, every name, every piece of evidence that had brought down a corrupt system. Visitors would stand in front of it for long minutes, reading the cramped handwriting, imagining what it must have taken for Fanny to keep it hidden, to protect it, to use it when the moment came. One spring, a filmmaker came to Sagebrush Flats. She wanted to make a documentary about the ledger and the trial. She interviewed descendants of the original homesteaders. She filmed the museum, the graves, the river. She spent weeks researching, digging through archives, piecing together the story. When the documentary was finished, it aired on public television across the Midwest. People watched it in living rooms and classrooms. They saw the photographs of Fanny and Joseph. They heard the testimony read aloud by actors. They learned about the drought, the threats, the danger. And they understood. This was not just a story about the past. It was a story about choices, about integrity, about refusing to let fear win. documentary ended with a shot of the two graves by the river. The camera held on them for a long moment as the sun set over the prairie, and the narrator, a woman with a voice like warm honey, spoke the final words. She said that Fanny Garrison Daniels and Joseph Daniels had left behind something more valuable than gold or land or power. They had left behind proof that love and courage could change the world, that standing up for the truth mattered, that one person's choice to fight could inspire generations. After the documentary aired, visitors to Sagebrush Flats doubled, then tripled. The museum had to hire more staff. The town council approved funds to preserve the graves and create a memorial park around them. Local businesses thrived. Hotels filled up. Restaurants opened. The town, which had struggled in recent decades as young people moved to cities, found new life. But it was not just about tourism. It was about pride. The people of Sagebrush Flats walked a little taller. They spoke about their history with reverence. They taught their children about Fanny and Joseph, about the ledger, about what it meant to stand up for what was right. And they carried that lesson into their own lives. When a developer tried to bribe the town council to approve a project that would have polluted the river, the council refused. They cited Fanny Garrison as their inspiration. When a corporation tried to buy up farmland and force families out, the community organized and fought back. They remembered Joseph Daniels, who had stood up to the railroad. The legacy was alive, not just in museums or documentaries or history books, but in the daily choices of people who had learned from the past and refused to repeat its mistakes. On the 100th anniversary of the trial, the town held a celebration. Descendants of Fanny and Joseph came from all over the country. There were speeches and reenactments and a ceremony at the graves. The governor of Nebraska attended and gave a speech about integrity and courage. A new plaque was unveiled at the museum, honoring all the homesteaders who had stood up to corruption. But the most moving moment came at sunset, when the crowd gathered by the river. Someone read aloud from Fanny's journal, passages about the drought and the fear and the hope that had kept her going. Someone else read from Joseph's letters, words about honor and duty and love. And then, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the prairie turned gold, a young girl stepped forward. She was 8 years old, a great-great-great-granddaughter of Fanny and Joseph. She had dark auburn hair and serious eyes, and she spoke in a clear, strong voice. She said that her ancestors had taught her that being brave did not mean you were not scared. It meant you did the right thing even when you were terrified. She said that loving someone meant standing beside them through everything, good and bad. She said that the truth mattered, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The crowd was silent. The river flowed. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and everyone there felt it. The connection to the past, the responsibility to the future, the simple, profound truth that the choices we make today echo through generations. When the celebration ended and the crowds went home, the town returned to its quiet rhythms. But something had shifted. The anniversary had reminded everyone why Sagebrush Flats mattered, why its history was worth preserving, why the story of Fanny and Joseph was worth telling. The museum stayed open late that night. People wandered through the exhibits, reading letters, studying photographs, standing in front of the ledger. And when the last visitor left and the curator locked the doors, the building settled into silence. But it was not an empty silence. It was full. full of memory, full of courage, full of love. Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass. The river flowed past the town, carrying its stories downstream. And on the gentle rise, two graves stood side by side, bathed in starlight. Fanny Garrison Daniels, Joseph Daniels. They had lived. They had loved. They had fought. They had won. Not because they were perfect. Not because they were fearless, but because they had chosen to stand together, to face the truth, to build something good. And that choice had changed everything. The night deepened. The stars brightened. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions. And in the quiet darkness, the spirit of Sagebrush Flats lived on, in every person who chose courage over fear, in every act of love that defied the odds, in every truth spoken when silence would have been easier. The story was not over. It would never be over. Because as long as people remembered Fanny and Joseph, as long as they told the story and learned from it and carried it forward, the legacy would endure. Not carved in stone, not frozen in time, but alive, growing, changing, a living testament to the power of two people who had refused to give up, who had chosen each other, who had changed the world.